In this video, we are going to show you how to replace your front axle. Let's get started. Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. After you have the wheel up in the air, continue on by removing all 6 of your 21mm lug nuts, and then the wheel. Now let's take one of our lug nuts and a spacer. We're going to use this to hold the rotor in place while we continue. Now that we have the safety nut on there, the next thing you want to do is carefully put something underneath the lower control arm to apply some upward pressure. Now let's move along to where our axle nut is located. Out on the outboard side of the axle, you're going to find that you have a cotter pin. Go ahead and remove that cotter pin and set it aside. It's a good idea to replace these. Use a 32mm socket to remove the axle nut. Use a hammer and punch in the center of the axle to break it free from the wheel bearing. Now we can remove the nut holding the outer tie rod end to our knuckle. We'll use a 22mm for this. The next area we're going to move to is the lower aspect of the strut where it connects onto your lower control arm. Now for this, you're going to find that you have a 19mm headed bolt coming from the forward side through to the rear. On the back side, there's a 19mm headed nut. We'll hold that nut in place and then remove the bolt. Now we're going to have to move along to removing the sway bar link from the lower control arm. This can very easily be done by coming through this area and holding onto the stud of the sway bar link with a 19mm wrench. While you're holding that, make your way out here to the 17mm nut and remove it. Once you have this one separated, go over to the other side of the vehicle and do the exact same thing. We have to move the bar down. Once you have the other side sway bar link off of there, you can swing the sway bar links aside and bring the bar down. Now at this point, we can pivot this up and down, but there's not enough room to be able to pull the axle through this area. So with that said, let's follow this strut all the way up to the top mounting area. Up along the top area, you're going to find 3 14mm headed nuts. One here, over here, and a little bit further towards the inboard side. Do not touch this center nut. We're not doing anything with that center nut. Now with that said, let's continue on with our 14mm socket and remove each of our 3 mounting nuts. You want to make sure you leave one of them on there, a couple good threads, so you can hold onto the strut while you continue removing it. Now at this point, we've removed our top nuts, an exception of one, which is on there just a few threads. Next, continue in between this area. You want to get in between the strut tower and the coil spring and gently pry this down. When you pry it down, make sure the lower aspect of the strut does not damage your axle boot. Now I'll fully remove that last nut from the top. Remove the strut. Now with the strut out of there, you want to pay attention to the top of the strut tower, where that new strut cap is going to go. You want to make sure it's a smooth surface. If you see any rusted or raised areas, go ahead and take them off of there. With the strut out of the way, we're going to move along to the inboard side of the axle. Now what we're looking for is 6 14mm headed bolts that hold the axle to the front differential. We'll remove all of them. Once you have all of them off of there, continue underneath the axle, give it a loving bonk. We're trying to break it free from the front differential. Let's take that axle and pull it towards the rear. Now let's move along to our ABS wire. We're going to break it free from this mounting point. Slide it right out of there. Now you want to follow the wire up to its mounting point, up to the frame of the vehicle. You're going to find that it should have a little clip that holds it in place. Ours is broken free. But generally, all you need to do is get to that point, and then you're going to try to find this locking tab. Carefully get in between the two areas and pry up against that locking tab. Once you're prying in that area, go ahead and separate it. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, take a peek. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion, and that would need to be dealt with. Let's take this ABS wire, swing it down here so we can make sure we tie it up so it's safe. Make your way up to your upper ball joint nut. We're going to have to remove this. You're going to find that you have a locking cotter pin. Remove that, set it aside. Now we can remove our 21mm nut. Keep in mind, when you remove this nut, there's the possibility this could come down off of the ball joint and swing towards you. So be extremely safe. Now at this point, I have to separate the upper control arm ball joint from the knuckle. To do that, I'm going to make sure I leave my nut on here a few good threads. Let's give it a loving bonk with the hammer to break it free. Now that we have that broken free, we can carefully separate this area. Before we do, when we start bringing this down, you want to be extremely careful not to put a tug on your brake flex hose. I've got this pulled down with plenty of slack on my flex hose. Grab that axle and pull it out of the wheel bearing. There it is, friends. Once you have the axle out of there, you want to continue on with a wire brush. You want to clean up the entire mating surface of the differential where the axle needs to mount to. This needs to be a smooth surface. Once you have that clean, continue on to cleaning all 6 of your axle mounting bolts and the strut mounting bolt. Once they're clean, go ahead and give them a quick inspection. If any of them have to be replaced, go ahead and replace it. Okay friends, now it's time to install our brand new axle. Let's have a look at the side that's supposed to go up against the front differential. It's a good idea to use some copper never sees in this area. There we are. Now let's take that axle and get ready to put it into position. As we bring it in, we remember that we still have to put this area of the shaft in through the bearing. So with that said, let's use some copper never sees on the splined area here as well. Now let's bring our knuckle up and start our upper ball joint into it. Once you have that in place, continue on with your nut. You can keep that loose for now, and we'll make our way back to where the axle connects onto the front differential. We'll turn this till our mounting bolt holes line up, slide the axle in as far as you can, start in each of the mounting bolts before you snug any of them. Once you have all of them started, we're going to continue on by snugging these up. When you snug these, you don't want to go around in a circle. You want to start from one side and then go completely over to the other side. That way there it goes in as flat and smooth as possible. Once you have all of them bottomed out, continue on by torquing them to 54 foot-pounds. Get that one. Next, you can move up to your upper ball joint nut. Snug this up and then torque it to 58 foot-pounds. Once you have that torque to 58 foot-pounds, continue on with your locking cotter pin. Now, if you find when you're trying to slide in your locking cotter pin that it does not line up, typically that means that the slot on the nut isn't lined up with the hole going through the stud of your ball joint. If that's the case, continue tightening this nut until the very next slot does. After that, go ahead and peen over that locking cotter pin. Move along to your ABS wire. Listen for a click, give it a tug, make sure that's secured together. After that, make sure you secure the entire thing to the frame of the vehicle. Let's follow the wire down and push it into its mounting point. All right, now it's time to install our front strut assembly. We'll take it and slide it into position, lining up our top studs with the top mounting holes. Now you can take your 3 mounting nuts and start each of those on. Now we're going to pay attention in the lower area of the strut. We need to line up the 2 holes and then take our mounting bolt and slide it right on through from the front towards the rear. When you're doing this, you might either have to raise or lower the lower control arm. Start on your mounting nut. Before you tighten any of your mounting hardware for your front strut, it's important to make sure you raise the lower control arm up to the original ride height position. So picture it as if the vehicle is on the ground, the weight of the body is down. It's going to be compressed a little bit. This can easily be done by raising the control arm until it feels as though the frame of the truck tries to lift as well. Now the next thing we want to do is bottom these out, and then we'll torque them to 22 foot-pounds. Now we can bottom out the lower strut bolt and then torque that to 99 foot-pounds. Now the next thing that you would want to do would be to put the sway bar link back into position into the lower control arm. But whenever you're doing a front strut or even a rear shock of any sort, you do these as a pair. So with that said, when you're doing the other side strut, this bar still needs to be in the down position to be able to replace it. So if that's the case, you're doing both, make your way over to the other side of the vehicle and get back to this point. Your new strut's in there and you're ready to put the sway bar link into the position. Let's take that bar, swing the sway bar link into the lower control arm. Start the nut on there. We're going to hold the stud with a 19mm wrench and snug the nut with a 17mm. Now it's time to reinstall our outer tie rod end. Go ahead and snug that and then torque it to 63 foot-pounds. Now we can move along to putting on our axle nut. We'll take this and bottom it out by hand. Once it's completely bottomed out, you can torque this to 101 foot-pounds. To make it so you can easily torque this, you can either have a second person inside the vehicle stepping on the brake, or use a pry bar. We'll carefully go in between the studs, making sure that we're going to be as flat as possible up against the threading so we do not damage it. Spin that rearward. It should lock in up against the caliper bracket. Make sure it's completely situated so it's not going to slip off. Now you can torque this to 101 foot-pounds. Be extremely careful. The next thing we'll do is slide this into place. You want to pay attention to the hole on the axle. Make sure it lines up with one of the slots on the locking device. If it doesn't seem like it lines up one way, just go ahead and pull it off and twist it until it does. Once you have it through, go ahead and pin it over so it's completely locked in position. Now we can remove our safety lug nut and spacer. At this point, you're ready to reinstall your wheel. We'll start on all 6 of our 21mm lug nuts, snug up the lug nuts, get the wheel safely back down on the ground, and then torque each of them to 97 foot-pounds. With the wheels safely back on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, the car's back together. At this point, you can go ahead and take it for a road test, make sure you don't hear any funny noises, then get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.